start speaking that he had the idea for Road Rage, not with the title, but for doing a car show. Since about 3 years ago, he started working and compiling art that he thought would be a great connection for art and popular culture and imagination and all of the things that this show now represents. And of course, the Museum of Modern Art has copied us with their Automania show. Thanks. We did it first, we started it first. But,
they should give you credit.
They should, I agree. Anyways, so Eric's going to start speaking, and I hope that everybody can just be careful walking around with the art and enjoy.
Thanks, sweetie. I would have clapped for her as well, but I clap for her every night, so I want to save it for the end of the day. Anyway, as April said, welcome to the church and to our first conversation. I'd actually like to see if we can achieve a kind of informality in terms of the presentation, where people feel free to not simply ask questions, but to opine about stuff that they're seeing in the works that are here in the show. Because art is, first and foremost, a conversation. I'll give you a little background of how I came about thinking about a car show. And then I'll talk about some of the works in the show that may be of interest to you. You know, this, you have to understand, is coming from an artist's point of view, not a historian's point of view or whatever. It's how I look at art, and so take that for what it is. As April said, I had this idea for a show based on something that, as a genre, was ubiquitous. And I actually didn't know how widespread the use of car imagery, car parts, carness is within the 20th century and now the 21st century, but it is probably art's largest genre. And it's a genre that is seen in films, music, theater, as well as the visual arts. And it's actually incomprehensibly vast. So it's worth exploring it from that point of view, but it also is something that is part of the ambition of this arts center, which is to try to find ways to bridge this enormous gap between the art world and a broader public. And a lot of the hurdles have to do with, a sense of elitism and intimidation in regards to that kind of thing, of feelings that you need to know more than you actually need to know in order to appreciate works of art, as well as a kind of visual illiteracy, where people don't actually know what they're looking at, to know how to understand the difference between the way this artist is talking to you versus this artist is talking to you. And so, part of the ambition of this series is to sort of, bring you into the scene of objects that are made, and to get comfortable with your own ability to sort of ask the questions that through what you're looking at, that the artist is intending you to ask questions about. This is a painting by Henry Taylor. It's called Look, and it's a very dynamic, very brushy very sort of immediate image, image making attack of this painting. You can see every mark, every decision that he's making, and you can feel the speed with which he's making it, right? Those are important. The difference between the attack of this painting versus the Peter Kane back here, which is incredibly slow and sort of hiding the hand, are indications of how they are connecting to the broader audience, right? And that's important to make note of that. Again, you have Mary Heilman painting of a highway that is, sort of breathtakingly simple. If it wasn't so dead on, it would be simplistic. But it actually captured a bigger experience that we're all familiar with in terms of, the horizon, the distance, the travel, the thing broken down into three elements, a black rectangle, a gray rectangle, and three white lines and stuff. So, to appreciate the reductive aspect of an artist, to capture something bigger than that with just three pieces of language. But anyway, the Henry Taylor here, so he draws you into almost the ferocity of his mark making. It feels like there's an urgency to this painting, and what is it? It's a scene where there's two guys sitting in a car that appears to be stopped, right? What you should always do when you look at art is try to figure out where the artist is placing you, because that's very much a part of the experience of it that they're getting at. Where are you? Are you close to the scene? Are you removed from the scene? Are you, is he looking directly at you, so you're very much involved in whatever's going on here? Are you, like in this Gregory Crutzen, nobody's looking at you. You're off on your own somewhere, seeing something that they're not even aware you're there. So again, those are two very big things to notice when you're looking at works of art, is where am I in this? Where do I want to be? Am I comfortable where he's putting me, she's putting me, etc.? In this case, it's somewhat uncomfortable where you're being placed, and it has to do with the ferocity of this stare, right? And it's interesting, the ferocity of this stare with the passivity of this. The passivity of the driver, presumably it's a driver, is a guy who's biding his time, waiting for whatever the exchange is going to be here, whatever's happening, and these are questions that aren't going to be fully answered, but they're questions that are raised. Why is this person looking at me the way he's looking at me? What is the exchange that's going to take place? Am I a figure of authority? Am I questioning them? Or am I providing them with something? Have they stopped? One could speculate a drug exchange, for example. So they pull up to a drug dealer, hands of stuff, goes, that kind of thing. Or is this a cop? Am I a cop? Questioning. Chances are I'm less a cop because there would be two cops and one would be on the other side, right? So I don't think he's setting that up. But the the thing of whether this artist is putting you into a position of authority or a position of weakness or a position of equality is also very present in terms of trying to figure out why we're so deeply engaged in such an utterly simple visual, right? Utterly simple in the sense that it's completely quotidian. Two guys in a car sitting someplace, stopped, in a moment. They seem to be friends. We've all had this experience. We all have been traveling with friends in a car, etc. And so it feels like I'm looking at something utterly banal, and at the same time I'm looking at something that is challenging me to think that this might be more than it initially appears to be. And I think for that reason it's extraordinary. There's some indications here that we might be on the West Coast, right? There's a San Francisco hat. Maybe it's a West Coast thing. There are things that are artistically brilliant but inexplicable in terms of narrative, which is the color of what's outside, the color, the green gold kind of thing. It's like that he had the balls to not paint, trees or street or whatever. Just say, no, this is all you need to know. This is a car. You can tell by the shape of the this and that. You don't need to know what's out there. It's just a color that pushes everything towards you. Right? He doesn't want you to go past this. Right? He's keeping you right here. And that increases the tension. If you see this in a photograph of this painting, you lose a lot of how to read the painting. Because a lot of what we're talking about, things I'm pointing out, have to do with the physicality of this object that keeps you looking, keeps you going back, keeps you admiring, the simplicity of description or the sensuosity or, the inexplicable. There's an area right here which you take for granted as something connected to not his beard, maybe his shirt, but it doesn't fit. But it doesn't destroy the painting either. So I'm always in awe of painters who can go, that's good enough. That's not exactly. I don't want you to get hung up over this. This is fine. You're going to see it. You're going to go, huh? And you go, oh well. And then, I love that. I tried to do that in my work as well. What is enough? What does it take to convince you that we're looking at something meaningful here, right? And he does this beautifully. And also, when you get a chance to come and stick your nose in this painting, go nose to nose with this guy, this is such a gorgeous passage of paint, and it's, amount of description, the clarity of the stare, the emotional content of that, and the simplicity with which he arrived at it. I mean, it's masterwork.
He also uses that arch in a very interesting way of the car, the hat,
Mm-hmm.
the eyebrows.
Yeah, that it all keeps you sort of rolling. Yeah, and then maybe it's just me, but I love his paunch. Which continues the arching motion of it. I said I was going to say something about how I started to think about cars, and I went right into talking about art instead. But maybe it was 5 years ago or so, I saw a show that had a Matisse painting in it that I had never seen before, done in 1917. And it's called Windshield, and it's a painting from an interior of a car looking through the windshield to a street scene, a French country road with alley of trees, you know. We're propped against the driver's steering wheel is a sketch pad. So, you know, the indication is the artist stopped to sketch. But what struck me wasn't that it was the first image of a car in art. It was actually the first new space, new interior space, which is huge because it caused me to begin to look further and to see whether, you know, how did that progress. And of course it took me into car art in a big way. But this new space was really about capturing something profoundly different from the centuries leading up to it, both in terms of art, which is, you know, art is about looking out at something. Then it moved from sort of looking at something to looking out at something, you know, being outside, looking out. Like this Gregory Crutzen is, you feel you're outside looking outside, right? This is not you're in a window looking through the window. But the window and doors and stuff became another way of going from an interior to an exterior experience. And that is both in terms of compelling pictorial problems for artists. That's huge. That's compelling. It offers a lot of different strategies for how to deal with that. But it also is something that, you know, talks on an emotional and psychological level about where one is versus the rest of the world, right? The inside and the outside. And so you start to look at the car, and you see that there's this thing that happens, which is a new technology, a new mode of transportation is introduced that has initially for artists a kind of curiosity to it. They don't quite know what it is. And it soon begins to replace old technologies. The horse-drawn becomes the motor-driven kind of thing. The delivery trucks that used to come, milk trucks were horse-drawn carriages, now become milk trucks, et cetera, et cetera. So you have this shifting usage with something that is all very familiar to us, which is mode of transportation. How to carry, be carried, get to, get from kind of thing. And then you begin to see that that the car assumes a sense of identity as an expression of self, of expression of worth, of expression of masculinity, of expression of place, class, etc., power, speed, those kind of things are wrapped up into it. Post-war, it becomes something that's connected to the future, an optimistic sense of a future, right? A space-agey future. And what struck me were two things. One is the car and the truck and all of those things, the motor-driven vehicle was the first time that the driver was brought into the cabin, right? And that's huge as a metaphor and as a certain kind of psychological attachment to something. The driver is very much like the brain of our bodies that moves us through time and space, et cetera, et cetera. And so now we've got this machine which is more, sort of connected to our sense of self. And that's a profound shift. And so the things that are depicted inside the interior space of a car take on that kind of readable significance. We've all had experiences driving on the LIE where people they're in a slow-moving traffic or they're stopped dead, but they treat the interior of the car as though it were their bathroom. They're putting on makeup, brushing their teeth, doing their nails, whatever. It's like a public, private space, right? And it's strange, but it's something that is sort of naturally occurring. I'm here. I'm on my way. I got to, blah blah blah, whatever. And so that's a good example of the reason why we should not take anything that's depicting the interior of a car as for granted, because it offers us more insight into who we are, where we are at any given moment. The other thing is that it became clear that you could follow, sort of metaphorically, you could follow the trajectory of the 20th century. Moving through a curiosity to a technological replacement to an industrial relationship, a progressive thing, a capitalistic thing, to an optimistic sense of the future. And then this weird thing happens. In the late 60s, the car crash gets introduced into the vernacular of art, right? Chamberlain being a very good example of that, even though that's not a 60s sculpture. It certainly speaks to that. There's a César piece upstairs from the early 70s that's a just crushed car part kind of thing. So they're speaking to that when you think of Warhol's car crash paintings as well. There's quite a bit of that. So somehow the love affair has changed, and it's really marking time by precisely that now this thing no longer has a comfortable relationship with the fantasies we've had about it. Now it's becoming something that's tragic, destructive, not what it was meant to be, et cetera, et cetera. And that kind of thing doesn't, here we're sitting here staring right at it. This is a Kristen Morgan sculpture that's breathtaking. This is a unfired clay sculpture of James Dean's Porsche that he died in, right? It's not only is it tragic in its memory, reference, etc., it also, because of its delicacy, continues the entropy of it. That this thing, anytime you almost stare at it, something falls off it. It's so fragile and speaks to fragility. And at the same time, it's the handmade, right? This is something that pulls you into the recreation through the language of the body to describe something that destroyed a body, right? It's moving.
Each time that you located, another piece falls
You're going to have to speak up a bit.
When you move this about to an exhibition, more pieces will keep falling off.
Yeah, I mean, it's, we're as delicate as it is, yes, and as careful as people are. I mean, we got it here, maybe a few little things drop off, but yeah, it's terrifying. And again, that's part of the experience of it. I mean, for an audience coming into this, that should be one of the things they wonder about is how the hell did they get this here? How could this travel? Et cetera. That's, huh? I have no idea. No. With some incredibly good art movers and who really knew how to. It comes in 3 sections. There are pallets under each one that it's screwed into. You lift the whole pallet up, etc. But you still have to carry it up the stairs and through the front door. And I mean, it's this the pinata. So yeah, let's talk about the pinata. This is an work of art by Justin Favela. Justin Favela is a young Mexican-American artist who sort of collapses two big traditions within the Hispanic community. One is lowrider cars, and the other is piñatas. And so this is a 1964, an image of a 1964 Chevy Impala lowrider that was one of the sort of cars out of the Chicago lowrider group. I didn't even know that there are different stylistic things that between this California lowriders, the Chicago lowriders. It's pardon me? New Mexico lowrider. And as well, yeah. It was all new to me. Anyway, he came and built this in place. So we actually don't know whether we can get it out. And if we can't get it out, we may end up doing a piñata party. Which could be kind of cool. We just have to figure out what to put in it. Right now, there's nothing in it. So do you go with the traditional candy stuff, or do you...
Donation purses.
Go what?
Donation purses.
I was going to say we put some money in there. That whoever gets it keeps it, but you have to pay to take a whack. Right?
Donation.
Yeah. A serious donation. Yeah. Yeah. Oof. All right, you're up first. Yay. Anyway, it's a fabulous. I hope you'll walk around if you haven't already and see it. The front of it is fantastic in its details. It's a wonderful piece, very humorous and stuff. This here, speaking of cars, transformative materials, etc. This is a sculpture by Peter Larkin. I don't know how many of you knew Peter. He was an Emmy-winning set designer. What did I say, Emmy? 4-time Tony. Sorry. Thank you. You should be right here, actually. Anyway, 4-time Tony winner, who was absolutely in love with cars and the fantasy of cars and motorcycles. And he was somebody, if you've never seen his drawings, they're amazing. He's somebody that drew constantly. He's one of those artists that was always doodling while talking or whatnot. And he has this great sense of line, this great sense of animation and stuff. And to look at this piece, you can see that it comes out of a drawing sensibility. What he was drawing sculpturally was based on the 1948 land speed record photograph of Raleigh Free, capturing the land speed record. And Raleigh Free had built this motorcycle. What Tom, what is the?
Vincent Black Shadow.
Vincent what?
Black Lightning.
Yeah, Black Lightning. That had the seat all the way in the back so he could lay down. So you see the figure flying off the back of this thing as part of this drawing. And it was, at that time the land speed record was set by him at 150 miles an hour, which is hysterical. If you get a chance to look at the face, you'll see goggles, a kind of skeleton head, goggles and teeth. It's really good. But again, within his love of cars, machines, speed, whatever, to the way that he captured the speed of it, the linear speed of this object is fantastic, and most of it is out of bamboo. So again, it's got this ironic fragility as a material attached to it. The show was, it's about cars, car material, car images, people that use car parts, etc. But it also was about the road. I talked about the Mary Heilman. There's a Cindy Sherman photograph over here from her film still series of what seems to be a young girl out in the middle of nowhere with a suitcase, in a sort of dusk light. This feeling of uncertainty and vulnerability. She's waiting for a ride, one assumes, and you can't help but be trepidatious about it. That this could not turn out well, right? So it's again an image of where all the signals are pointing you towards a set of associations that are, sort of generating this narrative. And of course, at the base of it is, how did she get here in the first place? There's a suitcase. Was she hitchhiking before, and this is as far as the ride went, and she's dropped off? You could even imagine that she was thrown out of the car at that point, and that's all there is to that. Now she's waiting to go again. There's, or again, you just don't know. And it ties in an interesting way to this Judy Dater photograph from the 80s, early 80s, which is, again, sort of inexplicable. It's a self-portrait. And here she is in the middle of nowhere. I mean, that right away says something in terms of self-projection. She's in the middle of nowhere, stark naked, and in this position of strangely, with nobody else around, etc., she's still covering herself, right? So the feeling of vulnerability that she's expressing, it reminds me of dreams that you're in, or I've been in, where all of a sudden I'm naked, in public, naked kind of thing. Has that quality to it. It's a logic that's an emotional logic, not a necessarily a narrative one. And there's a detail in there that I find hysterical that I don't think was part of her intention, just part of her life, which is that there aren't any tan lines on her body. So clearly she likes to sunbathe naked, except there are these absolutely stark tan lines where her sandal was, right? So the image, carries me forward because I keep thinking, so this is somebody who sunbathes nude except with her sandals on. Anyway. Apparently, yeah. Anyway, I think it's a wonderful photograph and sets up something that both because they're talking about women at different ages as well. So there's something about that as well. And the Mary Heilman kind of pulls the three of them together in that way. In terms of materiality of art and how important that is to the understanding of the thing the artist is trying to connect you with, I turn to the Malcolm Morley sculpture up there, the Ring of Fire, because the entire thing is paper. The entire thing. The tires are the most bizarrely deceptive, illusionistic aspect of it, because you can't believe they're not rubber. But the whole thing is made out of paper. So, again, there's a kind of wonderful material contradiction, which is that you're looking at some, Evel Knievel-like, daring madness of power, speed, male craziness, etc., done in a material that is like, next to feathers, would be the most fragile. So, and then I also love the fire itself is painted in watercolor, which is kind of beautiful in and of itself. I think on some level the difference between people who are really into cars and shaping them, building them, etc., it's not as clearly metaphoric. It's something, some other engagement that they have with this machine that is totally interesting. It's not one or the other, but from my point of view as an artist, as a painter, as an image maker, as whatever, that fact that artists take the car as another way of talking about our human experience, the transformative aspect of it in a very direct way is the part that excites me. So, and in relationship to car nuts, car fetishists, whatever, I turn to the Peter Kane back here, which is a really curious hybrid car. And Peter Kane was a young artist, died tragically young. He was painted cars, and he also was like a surfer and stuff. And he loved the kind of the hedonistic aspect of life. When I look at this car, I'm surprised that it's so curious. On one hand, it's like I have zero idea what I'm looking at, other than I'm looking at it, and I'm struck by the beauty in which it's painted. But it's like, how does somebody get to there? Is what I'm kind of puzzled by. And I was thinking the other day, there was an artist, Alan Turner, back in the 80s, who was doing these paintings about sex. And the paintings about sex were paintings of parts of the body that were in all the wrong places, in all the wrong sizes. There would just be things that were exaggerated in a way that you think, what is going on here? Or, parts of the body that seem to be like you've taken for granted, and yet they seem to be a major part of this thing that he was working with. And in conversation with him, he was talking about how in sex, in the sensuous aspect of sex, the touching feeling, the eyes closed, the exploration of this body form, things get out of proportion. Your fantasy gets attached to a sensation that enlarges whatever it is, or the mystery of something becomes bigger than the thing itself. You can't, in the act of sex, you can't put the body back together again imagistically whole. It's just everywhere. And when I think about that and I think about this, I think that this is a very similar way of approaching a car. He clearly is something, an artist who loved cars. And the only way he could express that love was in that same sort of proportion of it. You know, the beauty of the painting itself is how, compositionally exact it is. It's something that's not off balance in any way, even though there's nothing balanced about it, And, and as I say, beautifully painted.
Can you talk in a little bit more detail about the John Chamberlain?
She asked if I could talk more in detail about the Chamberlain. The simple answer is no. But at the same time, anecdotally, I will say, I've known his work for a very long time and knew him as well. And I even once, when I was a young artist, worked at a art crating company, and we had to crate a whole show of these things, which I've never forgiven him for. No, but anyway, his strategy of making a sculpture that is made out of something that is transformative, that is to say car material, car metal, steel, bumpers, whatever, fenders kind of thing, car material, physically shaping them into something that becomes a gestural, like an abstract expressionist painting, a gestural thing. So it's something that's a really slow process of making, physically, difficult way of making something that is about a fast gesture, is something that I've always found compelling about his work. And but the other day, somebody, we were showing Cornelia Foss around, who's a wonderful painter, showing her around, and she looked at that and she went, "Oh, it's a gun." And I went, "Oh my God, it's a gun." It was one of those things that until somebody named it, couldn't see it as that. I was looking at something else. I also there's a piece that sticks out that clearly is the trigger. And it's one of these things where I always was going, what the hell is that? Without attaching it to the possibility that it's a trigger, yes. So, pardon me?
What type of person was he?
What type of person he was?
Oh God, does larger than life describe Chamberlain? He was he was very much a part of the abstract expressionist character, hard living, hard drinking, passionate, took no prisoners in terms of silliness and stuff. And the guys that the music timing's just wrong here. Anyway, yeah, when we were creating his show, the truck drivers would go every day to pick up another set of sculptures that bring him over. There were these Hispanic guys, these Puerto Rican guys in the city. They couldn't wait to go. They loved going to him. They loved him. And mainly they loved him because he would like greet him at the door with a sledgehammer in one hand and a bottle of Jack Daniels in the other, and a cigarette in the mouth, and he'd welcome them in, and they'd talk and smoke a joint and, you know, whatever, have some whiskey, some bourbon, and he'd be sitting there throwing his sledgehammer at the piece he was working on. Anyway. Yeah, are there any questions? Any more questions? Anything? General, specific, what, Peter?
There's a photograph in the show by Jean Baudrillard, and he's really a great French philosopher who kind of did this on the side. How did you find that piece? I mean, he's not all that commonly known as a photographer. He's a great philosopher.
It was news to me. I didn't know it. The person that lent the photograph had just purchased it and had it sent back from Paris. He's talking about this photograph on the other side of this wall, which is a beautiful photograph of a car that had been run into a lake or something and had been there for a long time. And again, speaking of the car crash or whatever, kind of fits into that thing. But I you know, he's you know, super famous as part of the French philosophical group. His contribution to philosophy was the simulacra, which I have no idea what that is, even though I've tried to read up on it to try to figure out specifically how it places this, because the one aspect of his idea about the simulacra is that it is an icon for something that precedes the thing itself, which is a hard concept for my little brain to get around. But so I'm looking at this thing saying, is he in his photographic interest trying to follow a further expression of his philosophy? So is this some idea of a simulacra of something? Except it's not, because it actually is a car that's sunk. It preceded whatever you're going to make of it. Is the photograph, attempting to do more than be a photograph capturing that or not? And I don't know enough about philosophy to wheedle that out, but in terms of a person who was an intellectual, cultured person who also seemed to have a very sophisticated eye. I've looked up some of his other photographs, and some of them are, drop dead, smart, gorgeous things. So he, towards the end of his life, that's what he did. But.
Can you tell us about what appears to be a chrome car?
Yeah, the piece up there is a cast of the Codsworth Ford engine, which was the first aluminum engine, and it's a 8-cylinder engine that was used. If you saw the movie or know about the Ford versus Ferrari race, where they were trying to beat Ferrari, this was the engine that they used to get this lightweight. So here you have this sort of iconic symbol of not just power, but American ingenuity, the sort of pride, American pride, victory, etc. You have it done by a woman, Sylvie Fleury, who I don't know at all, but the fact that it's you would have thought first maybe a man would have done it, but no, it's done that, and I think that fits into the impetus. The other thing is it's cast bronze with a chrome patina on it. So she's taken the lightest engine and turned it into the heaviest. So that I think is part of the reading of it. It's she's also, by chroming it, turning it into a kind of exquisite monumental sculpture in that way, and yeah, I can't hear you.
How did you came out with the name of the exhibition? Road rage. Usually you'll think through anger and that association with something so beautiful.
Yeah, well, I wish I could take credit for it. Sara Cochran, our executive director, actually came up with the name, which it seemed to fit perfectly. And thinking of rage not in terms of the madness, but in terms of if you think of the amount of car art in the world, you can sort of think of it as the rage of carness. Everyone's on fire thinking about cars in some way. I don't think it's specific to America, but America itself is very much wrapped up in car culture, carness, etc. Within the language of art, as I was saying, it becomes a way of seeing ourselves, through the way each of the artists manipulates this thing that we all share, right? The essential thing, I think, to understand about art is that it's not about expression, freedom of expression. It's about freedom of interpretation. It's the way the history of art has moved us forward, as well as become a mirror for where it is at any given time, is precisely in how it is constantly reinterpreted. The themes of our lives, the themes of what we want, what we need, what we believe in, what we desire, what we're missing, what has been lost. All of those things are the iconography of a history that is human, and so we can read it. But for the artist, it's about keeping those themes alive, so that we live in a place that is both connected deeply to our history and moving us forward while recognizing the present. Okay? And that's not only our job as artists, it's what we're skilled to do. And so this is, if you want to make a cultural argument for why there should be art and artists, I just gave it to you. Culture is based on telling itself stories about who we are, who we believe we are, where we are in relationship to that. And so that's the thing you keep moving forward to do it. And the fact that we're looking here, 25 artists handling the same thing totally differently, is what's amazing. The breadth of creativity itself to come up with yet another way to think about the car, right? This is what's fantastic about it. And the fact is, we could put another 25 and another 25 and another 20, and it would all be different all the time, because that's so many of artists have figured out this incredible representation of the car as something essential to our being. Yeah. Thank you.